It has been 1 week since Ron DeSantis made it official, taking on Donald Trump for the Republican presidential nomination. And he's made it clear that he thinks the way to beat Trump is to always run to Trump's right, to be the true conservative against the pretender Donald Trump. It's why he thinks he has a comparative advantage if he runs against the one thing the last administration unequivocally did right, the COVID vaccine and Operation Warp Speed.
The way they weaponized these COVID vaccines was a massive incursion into our freedoms. They wanted to deny people the right to put food on their table if they didn't bend the knee and get a COVID shot that they may not have wanted and that many of them did not need. We can never allow warp speed to trump informed consent in this country ever again.
DeSantis can't bring himself to say the name Trump except sort of smuggle it in there at the end of that. He thinks that position is a winner. He's been touting his anti-vax record in almost every stump speech. But while it might be tactically enticing, a way to distinguish himself from Trump, I personally think it's strategically disastrous from a political point of view. His competition thinks so, too. One Trump super PAC just released an attack ad pointing out that DeSantis was all for vaccines before he was against them.
We interrupt your regularly scheduled programming to bring you this important public service announcement.
So my view is if you get a vaccine, the vaccines are effective, you're immune.
If you are vaccinated, fully vaccinated, the chance of you getting seriously ill or dying from COVID is effectively zero.
The vaccines protect you. Get vaccinated.
So that's Team Trump attacking DeSantis for being pro-Trump vaccine. Because Ron DeSantis clearly thinks now that running as the unfettered anti-vaccine candidate is the way to go. But again, it seems like a truly disastrous position to hold in the general election. Margie O'Meara is a Democratic strategist and pollster. Tim Miller is a former RNC spokesman, now a writer at large for The Bulwark, and both join me now. I should note, Tim, you wrote about this. I should note that it isn't just, you could do vaccine mandates as a sort of soft version of this. But the other day, someone was yelling at Trump with anti-vax heckling at an event, and the DeSantis people tweeted it about how he didn't talk about how all the people that the vaccines hurt, right? Much more than the mandates, the actual vaccine. You wrote this: as expected, DeSantis hits Trump from the anti-vax right. The two best things Trump did, Operation Warp Speed and First Step Act, are the first attacks out of the gate. At what point does this become too much for remaining normie R's to swallow? Do you think he sticks with this?
I do. I think DeSantis has made the calculation that the answer to my last question there is that normie R's will stick with him no matter what, because he's a better bet for them than Donald Trump, and they're so desperate to get rid of Donald Trump. And so I think DeSantis has decided that he has no risk, at least in the primary. It's the primary discussion. Maggie can talk about the general. No risk in the primary on that center-right flank. Eventually, people will line up behind him. He's not worried about the Tim Scotts of the world. And that he can find issues where he can outflank Trump on the MAGA right. And this is one of them. And I just think that just to that tweet that you said that DeSantis wore him said yesterday, I thought this was so telling. Yeah. Trump, in that same speech where he got heckled about side effects of the vax, called the person that killed Ashley Babbitt a thug. And the DeSantis campaign does not defend the Capitol Police that defends the Capitol. And they could have said nothing about the Trump speech. They could have attacked him over that. But instead, they chose to attack him for defending the vaccine. I just think that's very telling about what they think their strategic play is here.
Yeah, and I think the primary is distinct. I won't pretend to know. Margie, I'm curious what you think of this in the general. If you're going to spend 6 to 10 months running as the anti-vax candidate, again, not just vaccine mandates, which I think there's sort of more cross-pressure views on, but the anti-vax candidate, which I think he's flirting with and sometimes endorsing, what does the polling say? What do you think about that as a general election issue?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because for a long time, you had a lot of Republican leaders wanting to tell people to forget about COVID, ignore COVID, forget about it. But now they're encouraging their voters to really think about this in a way that's really at odds with where they were a little while ago. And if this worked as a strategy in the general election, you would have seen Republicans more successful in 2022 around the country. There were lots of governor's races, Senate races, congressional races, local races where you had Republicans trying to go back to the times and harken back to the times of school closures and use that as something. And that's different from the vaccine, but adjacent. And it didn't work because people are now looking forward. And now as time has moved on to go back again, I think is going to be hard. Now, polling we did for Navigator shows most Republicans say that they have received the vaccine. About 2/3 have say they've received the vaccine. It's about 14% of the country that are Republicans who have not received the vaccine. So it's not really enough to have a general election strategy. That doesn't mean that all those voters are going to vote based on that. Doesn't mean there aren't voters who have had the vaccine and might vote based on that. But it's a sign that this is not a unifying message.
The first point you make there, I want to go back to, Tim. I think it's such a smart one because there's the specifics of the vaccine messaging, which I think is actually just like substantively incredibly dangerous, and that we've unnecessarily lost hundreds of thousands of our fellow Americans because of. And I will never forgive the people that played a part in that, to be totally honest. But there's also just this political question of like being obsessed looking back. And I think there's something, Margie, you're putting a finger on, Tim. People on the right, particularly like the most like, part of the base, are very obsessed with 2020. They're obsessed with like the George Floyd protests. They're obsessed with the Trump election. They're obsessed with like the media and Hunter Biden and why they didn't put that. They're obsessed with the COVID policies. It is like this fuel, this of rage. And I think it's driving a lot of Republican-based politics in a way that the rest of the country is like really trying not to think about that anymore.
Yeah, and it makes you seem kind of weird and obsessive, right, to be continuing to talk about this. But I do think it's true that it's bottom up. Like when I went to the Turning Point USA, the Charlie Kirk group, I went to their conference back in December. Exactly those issues that you just talked about: COVID, George Floyd, woke, 2020 election fraud. Like that's what was animating the attendees that I talked to, right? And so that's why the politicians are talking about this. Just one other thing to Maggie's point with the risk DeSantis plays here, I think, is a big part of his argument with the soft MAGA voters, right, is that he's more electable than Trump. And so I think the more he flirts with this kind of stuff, there's this unforeseen risk of him going far out to the right and seeming weird, seeming out of touch, and having those voters like look at Trump kind of like they looked at Trump and Cruz and thought that Trump was the more mainstream one. And I think this is a risk that DeSantis plays, why the general election and primary politics interplay with each other.
And there's one more thing, Margie, and I think this has to do with sort of the complexities of politics, which is that people think about Trump as sort of beating everyone in that primary from the right, but he didn't. He was sort of to the left on a bunch of things, the Iraq War, which he said he opposed, although he hadn't, on entitlements and social insurance, Social Security, Medicare. He supported universal health care. He is attacking DeSantis from the left on Social Security and Medicare, on a national sales tax, which was a big sort of like right-wing plan, right? We're going to get rid of the income tax. It strikes me that that's actually pretty effective stuff, even in a Republican primary. I'm curious what you think the polling shows.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to show that politics is not always about just voting for a list of policy positions, especially when it comes to Trump. People are voting for, and it's not just Trump, this is true with a lot of elections, who do they feel is fighting for them, who cares about them, who would go out and fight for you, who wants to meet you, wants to talk to you, understands you, gets you. And a lot of Republicans feel that way about Trump. It's less about the litany of a variety of policy positions. And that has made some of this very complicated, both for Democrats and Republicans. Republicans who say, hey, conservatism means this. It doesn't mean spending on all these programs. And for Democrats who say, well, Republicans, are all over the place. You're inconsistent.
Margie O'Meara and Tim Miller, thank you both. Have a great weekend.